Have you ever said something so dangerous that it shattered your entire world in seconds? That's exactly what happened when 32-year-old single father Adrian Cole confessed his feelings to 30-year-old billionaire CEO Sienna in an empty parking garage late one stormy night. One reckless sentence turned their lives upside down, triggering investigations, public humiliation, and a scandal that forced them to choose between safety and happiness. Stay with me until the end to see how far a father will go when love costs him everything. And hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from so I can see how far this story travels. The fluorescent lights in the underground parking garage beneath Sterling Global's headquarters buzzed and flickered like dying insects. Adrian Cole's footsteps echoed against the concrete walls as he followed Sienna toward her car, the sound swallowed by the low rumble of thunder outside. It was past midnight, again. He shouldn't have been there. He should have been home hours ago, kissing his daughter Mia goodnight, making sure she'd brushed her teeth, checking that her nightlight was still working. Instead, he was trailing after a woman who terrified half the business world, his heart pounding harder than it had any right to. Sienna walked ahead of him with that same sharp, controlled stride she always had. Heels clicking against the concrete, black coat pulled tight around her shoulders. Phone screen lighting her face in quick flashes as she scrolled through emails that never stopped coming. She hadn't said a word since they'd left the conference room upstairs, where they'd spent the last 4 hours reviewing quarterly projections that didn't need both of them present, but somehow always did. Adrian knew he should let her go. Just turn around, walk to his beaten-up Honda, drive home, and stop pretending these late nights were about work. But he didn't. Sienna. She stopped. Didn't turn around. Just stopped walking, her shoulders stiffening under that expensive coat. What? Not a question. A warning. Adrian swallowed hard. The garage felt impossibly vast and suffocatingly small at the same time. Somewhere above them, rain hammered against the city. Down here, there was only the hum of lights and the weight of everything he'd been holding back for months. I need to say something. Then say it and go home to your daughter. That stung. It was supposed to. Sienna had a gift for finding the exact words that would cut deepest, and she wielded it like a scalpel. But Adrian had learned something about her over the past 6 months of late nights and quiet conversations. She only used that blade when she was scared. If things were different, he said, his voice rougher than he intended, I'd take you home with me tonight. No hesitation. The silence that followed felt like falling. Sienna turned slowly. Her face was unreadable in the harsh overhead lighting, all sharp angles and shadows, dark eyes that could freeze entire boardrooms into submission. She was beautiful in a way that made people nervous, the kind of beauty that came with power and money and the absolute certainty that she didn't need anyone. What did you just say to me? Adrian's hands were shaking. He shoved them into his pockets. You heard me. You're out of your mind. Probably. I'm your boss, Adrian. I'm the CEO of this company. You're a data analyst with a kid and an ex-wife and a life that doesn't involve... She stopped herself, jaw tightening. You need to leave. Now. But she didn't move. Neither did he. I know exactly who you are, Adrian said quietly. I know what this would cost. I'm saying it anyway. Something shifted in her expression. Just for a second, so fast he almost missed it. Fear. Real, raw fear. Not of him. Of what he'd just made impossible to ignore. You don't know anything about me, Sienna said, but her voice had lost its edge. I know you stay late because you don't want to go home to an empty penthouse. I know you drink your coffee black because you think adding milk is a sign of weakness. I know you check your phone every 3 minutes like you're waiting for something important, but it never comes. Adrian took a step closer. I know you're brilliant and terrifying and so goddamn lonely it's killing you. Sienna's breath hitched. For the first time since he'd met her, she looked genuinely thrown. Stop. Why? Because I'm right? Because this is insane. Her voice cracked on the last word. You have a daughter. You have responsibilities. You can't just... I'm not asking you for anything. Adrian interrupted. I'm just telling you the truth. If I could, I would. The rain outside grew louder. Somewhere in the distance, a car alarm wailed and died. Sienna stared at him like he'd just detonated a bomb between them, which, in a way, he had. You're going to regret this, she whispered. I know. Everything's going to fall apart. I know that too. For a moment, one breathless, impossible moment, Adrian thought she might close the distance between them. Her eyes softened, her lips parted, and he could see her fighting with herself, logic warring with something far more dangerous. Then a car door slammed. They both froze. Across the garage, maybe 50 feet away, Marcus Chen from accounting stood beside his sedan, keys in hand, staring directly at them. His face was a mix of shock and awkward realization, like he'd just walked in on something he absolutely should not have seen. "Oh," Marcus said stupidly. "I didn't, Sienna's entire body went rigid. The vulnerability vanished from her face, replaced by ice-cold control. When she spoke, her voice could have cut glass. "Mr. Chen? Working late?" Just forgot my laptop," Marcus stammered, clearly debating whether he should run. I'm leaving, right now. Didn't see anything." But he had seen something. They all knew it. Marcus practically dove into his car and peeled out of the garage like the building was on fire. The sound of his tires squealing echoed long after he was gone. Adrian felt his stomach drop. "Sienna, don't." She held up one hand, not looking at him. "Do not say another word." "He's not going to, Yes, he is." Her voice was hollow now, all the fight drained out of it. "By morning, everyone will know. HR will get involved. The board will lose their minds. And everything I've built will be at risk because you couldn't keep your mouth shut in a parking garage." Adrian wanted to argue, to tell her it didn't have to be that bad, but they both knew he'd be lying. Corporate environments didn't forgive this kind of thing, especially not when one party was a billionaire CEO and the other was a single father barely scraping by on a mid-level salary. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. Sienna finally looked at him, really looked at him. And for just a second, he saw past the armor, saw the woman underneath who was just as scared and confused as he was. "You should be," she said. Then she turned and walked to her car without another word. Adrian stood there long after she was gone, alone in the fluorescent wasteland of the parking garage, listening to the storm rage above and knowing with absolute certainty that he'd just destroyed both their lives. He should have felt panicked, terrified. Instead, all he felt was a strange, reckless relief. Because for the first time in years, he told the truth. But the rumors started before Adrian even made it to the office the next morning. He knew something was wrong the second he walked through the glass doors of Sterling Global's main lobby. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. Eyes tracked him across the floor. Lisa from reception gave him a look of pure pity, which was somehow worse than outright hostility. Adrian's phone buzzed. A text from Jeremy in IT. "Dude, what did you do last night?" Another buzz. This time from Priya in marketing. "HR wants to see you, now." Adrian's chest tightened. He'd barely slept. He'd spent most of the night staring at his bedroom ceiling, replaying the parking garage scene over and over, watching Marcus Chen's shocked face materialize in his memory like a recurring nightmare. Mia had asked him why he looked sad during breakfast. He'd lied and said he was tired. He was a terrible father. The HR office was on the 12th floor, all beige walls and uncomfortable chairs designed to make you feel guilty, even if you hadn't done anything wrong. Adrian had been called in exactly once before, 3 years ago, when his ex-wife had shown up drunk and screaming in the lobby. That had been humiliating. This was going to be worse. Janet Reese, the head of HR, was waiting for him. She was a small woman with steel gray hair and reading glasses that she weaponized like judges' robes, peering over them in a way that made grown men confess to crimes they hadn't committed. "Mr. Cole, sit." Adrian sat. Janet folded her hands on the desk between them. "We received a report this morning regarding inappropriate conduct between you and Ms. Vale." There it was, clean, clinical, devastating. Before you say anything," Janet interrupted, "I need to inform you that this is a formal investigation. Anything you say will be documented and may be shared with the executive board. Do you understand?" Adrian nodded, his throat dry. "Good. Now, can you describe what happened in the parking garage last night at approximately 12:47 a.m.? 12:47. Marcus must have noted the time, probably sent an email the second he got home. We were talking, Adrian said carefully. About what? Work. Janet raised one eyebrow. At 1:45 in the morning, in an empty parking garage. About work. We'd been reviewing quarterly reports. For 4 hours. It's a complicated quarter. Janet sighed and pulled off her glasses, which Adrian had learned was never a good sign. Mr. Cole, I'm going to be blunt with you. A witness reported seeing you and Ms. Vale in what appears to be a romantic or emotionally intimate exchange. Is that accurate? Was. Adrian's pulse hammered in his ears. He could lie. He could say Marcus misunderstood, that it was nothing, that, yes. Janet blinked. I'm sorry? Yes, that's accurate. Adrian met her gaze head on. I told her how I felt. Nothing physical happened, but yes, it was personal. For a moment, Janet looked genuinely thrown, like she'd been prepared for denial, anger, maybe even tears, not honesty. Mr. Cole, do you understand the position this puts the company in? Ms. Vale is not just your superior, she's the CEO. This is a massive conflict of interest. There are power dynamics, liability concerns, potential harassment claims. I'm not claiming harassment, Adrian said firmly. I made a choice. She didn't do anything wrong. That's not how the law sees it. Then the law is missing the point. Janet put her glasses back on, her expression hardening. Effective immediately, you're being transferred to the Denver office. You'll report to a different supervisor, work different hours, and have no direct or indirect contact with Ms. Vale. You have 72 hours to accept the transfer or resign. Adrian's stomach dropped. Denver. That was halfway across the country. He'd have to uproot Mia, leave her school, her friends, the life he'd spent 3 years carefully rebuilding after the divorce. I can't move to Denver. I have a daughter. Then you'll need to find another solution. This is insane. I told a woman how I felt. I didn't commit fraud. I didn't steal from the company. I didn't. You created a hostile work environment, Janet said flatly. Whether you intended to or not, the board has already been briefed. This is not up for debate. Adrian stood, his hands curling into fists at his sides. What about Sienna? Ms. Vale is being handled separately. Is she being transferred too? Or is this just punishment for the guy who doesn't have a billion-dollar empire to protect him? Janet's expression didn't change. You have 72 hours, Mr. Cole. I suggest you use them wisely. Twuk. Adrian spent the rest of the day in a haze. He cleaned out his desk, not because he'd decided to resign, but because his coworkers were looking at him like he'd committed treason. Priya brought him a box without saying a word. Jeremy gave him an awkward pat on the shoulder and whispered, She's hot, man, but Jesus. By noon, the entire company knew. By 2, it had spread to other departments. By 4, someone had posted about it on an internal message board, and the thread had 300 comments. Adrian left early. He couldn't take the stairs anymore. He picked Mia up from school, and the second she climbed into the car, she knew something was wrong. Daddy, are you sad again? Just a tough day, sweetheart. Is it because of work? Yeah, but it's okay. We'll figure it out. Mia reached over and patted his arm with her small hand, the same way she did when he had a headache or when she thought he needed cheering up. It broke his heart. I love you, Daddy. I love you too, Mia. So much. That night, after Mia was asleep, Adrian sat at his kitchen table with a beer he didn't really want and stared at his phone. He drafted a dozen texts to Sienna and deleted every one. I'm sorry. Are you okay? This is my fault. I don't regret it. He didn't send any of them. Instead, he opened his laptop and started looking at job listings in cities he didn't want to move to, trying to figure out how to tell his 7-year-old daughter that her life was about to implode because her father had fallen for the wrong woman. Sienna didn't sleep that night. She'd gone straight from the parking garage to her penthouse, poured herself a glass of wine she didn't drink, and stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city she'd conquered. Below her, the streets glittered with lights and life and people who didn't have to choose between their hearts and their empires. She hated Adrian Cole. Not because of what he'd said, because he'd made her feel it. For 6 months, she'd kept him at arm's length, maintaining the perfect professional distance, Even as the late nights piled up and the conversations grew longer and the space between them grew harder to ignore, she'd told herself it was nothing. A distraction, a temporary fascination with someone who didn't worship her the way everyone else did. But the truth was worse. She'd fallen for him, slowly, quietly, against every rule she'd built her life around. And now the board was going to crucify her for it. Her phone rang at 7 in the morning. Richard Holt, the board chairman, didn't bother with pleasantries. Emergency meeting, 9 a.m. Don't be late. Sienna arrived at 8:45, perfectly dressed, perfectly composed, and perfectly ready to go to war. The boardroom was a cathedral of glass and steel, 20 floors above the city, with a table long enough to seat 30 people who all wanted a piece of her company. Today, only 8 of them were there. The core. The ones who mattered. Richard sat at the head of the table, flanked by Margaret Wells and David Park, the 2 board members who'd been gunning for her removal since she'd taken over at 27. They wore matching expressions of barely concealed glee. Sienna, sit. Mam sitashun potpati shchoon. She sat. I assume you know why we're here. I have a general idea. Margaret leaned forward, her voice dripping with false concern. We've received disturbing reports about your conduct with a subordinate employee. Care to explain? Sienna kept her expression neutral. There's nothing to explain. A colleague misinterpreted a private conversation. That's all. A private conversation, David repeated slowly. In a parking garage, at nearly 1 in the morning, with a man who reports up through your chain of command. Adrian Cole doesn't report directly to me, but he works for you, which makes this a liability nightmare. Richard pulled out a folder and slid it across the table. Legal says if this goes public, we're looking at potential harassment claims, shareholder lawsuits, and a media circus that could cost us millions. Madness. Sienna didn't touch the folder. There's no harassment, no misconduct, no grounds for a lawsuit. That's not the point, Margaret said sharply. The point is perception. You're the face of this company, Sienna. You can't afford to be seen as someone who lets her personal life interfere with, my personal life is none of your concern. It is when it threatens the company. The room went silent. Sienna looked around the table, at these men and women who'd spent years trying to control her, undermine her, push her out. They thought they had her cornered now, thought this was their chance. They were probably right. What do you want? She asked quietly. Richard folded his hands. We want you to make a statement, publicly, denying any romantic involvement with Adrian Cole. We want you to cooperate fully with HR's investigation, and we want you to implement a company-wide policy prohibiting workplace relationships, effective immediately. And if I refuse, then we'll have no choice but to question your ability to lead this company. There it was. The threat she'd been expecting. Sienna stood. I need 24 hours. You have 12. She walked out without another word. Adrian was halfway through his second cup of coffee when his phone rang. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer. Hello? It's me. His heart stopped. Sienna's voice was quiet, strained, nothing like the sharp confidence he was used to. Where are you? He asked. My car, parked outside your building. Adrian looked out his window. Sure enough, a sleek black sedan was idling at the curb. I'll be right down. Ma. He didn't bother with shoes, just grabbed his keys and took the stairs 2 at a time. Sienna was sitting in the driver's seat, staring straight ahead, hands gripping the wheel like she was trying to keep herself from falling apart. Adrian climbed into the passenger seat, and for a long moment, neither of them spoke. They want me to deny it, Sienna said finally. The board. They want me to say nothing happened, that it was all a misunderstanding. Are you going to? Yeah. I don't know. She laughed bitterly. I built this company from nothing, Adrian. I fought for every dollar, every investor, every inch of respect. And now they're telling me to choose between everything I've worked for and... She stopped. And what? Sienna turned to look at him, and her eyes were bright with unshed tears. And the first real thing I've felt in 10 years. Adrian's chest ached. He reached over and took her hand, half expecting her to pull away. She didn't. I don't know what to do, she whispered. Yes, you do. If I fight this, I'll lose everything. The company, my reputation. The board will destroy me. So let them. Sienna stared at him like he'd lost his mind. You're telling me to walk away from $1 billion company? I'm telling you to stop living your life for people who don't care about you. Adrian squeezed her hand. You're the bravest person I know, Sienna. You've built empires. You've terrified boardrooms full of men twice your age, and you're going to let them bully you into pretending you don't feel something real? It's not that simple. It is, though. You just have to decide what matters more. Sienna pulled her hand away and pressed her palms against her eyes. You don't understand. You have Mia. You have something worth protecting. I have nothing but this company. That's not true. It is. Without Sterling Global, I'm nobody. You're Sienna Vale, Adrian said fiercely. You're brilliant and terrifying and strong enough to rebuild anything. And if you walk away from this, you're not losing yourself. You're finding yourself. For a long time, Sienna didn't respond. She just sat there, breathing hard, fighting a battle Adrian couldn't see but could feel in every tense line of her body. Finally, she looked at him. If I do this, she said slowly, if I choose you over the company, everything falls apart. You lose your job. I lose mine. We both end up broke and ruined, and together. Sienna's breath caught. We end up together, Adrian repeated. And maybe that's enough. For the first time since he'd met her, Sienna Vale started to cry. Not the quiet, controlled kind of tears. Real, messy, human tears that she'd probably been holding back for years. Adrian didn't say anything. He just pulled her into his arms and held her while she fell apart in the front seat of her expensive car, parked outside his terrible apartment building, in the middle of a life that was about to burn to the ground. And for the first time in a long time, neither of them felt alone. Sienna pulled away first, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand in a gesture so uncharacteristically vulnerable that Adrian had to look away to give her space. She cleared her throat, straightened her shoulders, and became the CEO again right in front of him, armor snapping back into place like she'd never let it fall. I have a board meeting in 3 hours, she said, her voice steadier now. They're going to demand answers. What are you going to tell them? She didn't answer right away. Instead, she stared through the windshield at the gray morning sky, jaw working like she was chewing through possibilities and discarding them one by one. The truth, I think. Adrian's stomach dropped. Sienna? Not all of it, just enough. She turned to look at him, and her eyes were red but clear. I'm not going to lie for them anymore. I've spent my entire adult life performing for boardrooms full of people who don't give a damn about me. I'm done. You don't have to blow up your life to prove a point. I'm not proving a point. I'm choosing something different. She reached over and touched his face, thumb brushing his cheekbone. You made me realize I've been living in a cage I built myself, and I don't want to die in it. Before Adrian could respond, his phone buzzed. He pulled it out and saw a text from his ex-wife, Rachel. We need to talk. Today. Perfect. Just perfect. Sienna saw his expression change. What is it? Well, Rachel, she probably heard about the rumors. She's going to use this against you. Yeah, she's good at that. Sienna's face hardened. Don't let her. Whatever she threatens, don't give her an inch. Easy for you to say. You don't have a kid caught in the middle. No. But I know what it's like to have people use your vulnerabilities as weapons. She squeezed his hand once, then let go. I need to go. But Adrian, whatever happens today, don't apologize for telling the truth. Not to HR, not to Rachel, not to anyone. What about you? I'll handle the board. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. I've been handling them for years. This is just one more fight. Adrian wanted to believe her. He wanted to think that Sienna Vale, the woman who'd built a tech empire before she turned 30, could walk into that boardroom and come out unscathed. But he'd seen the fear in her eyes last night. He knew this was different. Be careful, he said quietly. You too. She drove away, and Adrian stood on the sidewalk watching her taillights disappear into traffic, feeling like he'd just watched someone walk toward a cliff edge without a rope. He went back upstairs, called in sick to work, Not that it mattered since he was being transferred or fired anyway, and texted Rachel, coffee shop on 5th, noon. Her response came immediately, 11, and don't be late. Adrian spent the next 2 hours trying not to spiral. He made breakfast for Mia, helped her find her library book, braided her hair even though he always did it crooked, and dropped her off at school with a kiss and a promise that everything was fine. She looked at him like she didn't quite believe him. Smart kid. By the time Adrian walked into the coffee shop, Rachel was already there, sitting at a corner table with her arms crossed and her lawyer face on. She'd been a paralegal when they'd met, back when Adrian still thought corporate law was impressive instead of soul-crushing. Now she worked for a firm that specialized in family court cases, which meant she knew exactly how to weaponize custody agreements. "You're late," she said. "It's 10:58. "Close enough." Rachel gestured to the chair across from her. "Sit." Adrian sat. Rachel studied him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. She'd always been good at that, turning herself into a blank wall when she wanted information. It was one of the things that had made their marriage so exhausting. "So," she said finally, "you're sleeping with your boss." "I'm not sleeping with anyone. That's not what I heard." "Then you heard wrong." Rachel leaned back, one eyebrow raised. "Adrian, I got 3 separate messages this morning from people who work at Sterling Global. Apparently the entire company is talking about how you and the CEO were caught having some kind of romantic encounter in the parking garage. You want to tell me that's all made up?" Adrian's jaw tightened. "It's complicated." "It's really not. Either you're involved with her or you're not." "I told her how I felt. That's it. Nothing physical happened." "Oh, well, that makes it so much better," Rachel said sarcastically. "You're not sleeping with the billionaire. You're just confessing your feelings to her in parking garages at midnight." "Great judgment, Adrian. Really stellar. This has nothing to do with Mia." "It has everything to do with Mia." Rachel leaned forward, her voice dropping. "Do you have any idea how this looks? You're a single father who's supposed to be providing stability for our daughter, and instead you're getting yourself tangled up in some corporate scandal with a woman who probably doesn't even know what a PTA meeting is. Don't talk about Sienna like that." "Oh, it's Sienna now, not Ms. Vale, not your boss." "Sienna." Rachel shook her head. "You're in over your head. Basi, this all?" "I know what I'm doing." "Do you? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you're about to lose your job, your reputation, and possibly your custody rights because you couldn't keep your feelings to yourself." Adrian's blood went cold. "What are you talking about?" Rachel pulled out her phone, tapped a few times, and turned it to show him an email. It was from her lawyer, outlining potential grounds for a custody modification based on unstable home environment and poor judgment regarding romantic relationships. "You can't be serious," Adrian said quietly. "I'm dead serious. If you lose your job, how are you going to support Mia? If this scandal follows you to your next position, what kind of example are you setting? And if you move to Denver, I'm not moving to Denver." "Then you're resigning. Either way, you're unemployed." Rachel put her phone away. "I'm not trying to hurt you, Adrian. I'm trying to protect our daughter." "By threatening to take her away from me?" "By making sure she has at least one parent who isn't making reckless decisions." Adrian stood, his hands shaking. "I've been a good father to Mia. I've done everything right. I pick her up from school, I help with homework, I make sure she feels loved and safe, and now you're throwing it all away for a woman you barely know." "I know her better than you think." "You've been working late with her for a few months. That's not knowing someone, Adrian. That's infatuation." "It's more than that." Rachel stood too, her expression softening slightly. "Maybe it is, but it doesn't matter, because you're her father first, and everything else comes second, including this." Adrian wanted to argue, to tell her she was wrong, that he could be a good father and still deserve happiness. But the words stuck in his throat because part of him, the part that had been carrying guilt since the divorce, wondered if she was right. "I'm not going to fight you on this," Rachel said quietly. "But if you keep going down this road, I will, and you know I'll win." She left without waiting for a response. Adrian sat back down, his coffee untouched, staring at the table and feeling like the walls were closing in from every direction. Across the city, Sienna walked into the boardroom at exactly 9 o'clock. The 8 board members were already seated, their faces arranged in expressions ranging from concern to barely concealed hostility. Richard Holt sat at the head of the table like a king preparing to pass judgment. "Sienna, thank you for coming. Did I have a choice?" "There's always a choice." Richard gestured to an empty chair. "Sit, please." Sienna remained standing. "I'd rather not." Margaret Wells cleared her throat. "This isn't going to be a pleasant conversation, Sienna. You might want to sit down. I'm fine where I am." Richard exchanged a glance with David Park, who shrugged as if to say, "Your funeral." "Very well," Richard said. "We've had 12 hours to review the situation regarding you and Mr. Cole. Legal has confirmed that while there's no direct policy violation, the optics are terrible." Margaret interrupted. "The optics are terrible. We've already had 2 reporters call asking for comment. If this hits the press..." "It won't," Sienna said calmly. "You can't guarantee that." "Actually, I can, because I'm resigning." The room went silent. Richard blinked. "I'm sorry, what?" "I'm resigning as CEO of Sterling Global, effective immediately. You can draft whatever press release you want. Say I'm pursuing other opportunities. Say I'm stepping down for personal reasons. I don't care. But I'm done." For a moment, no one spoke. Then Margaret started laughing, a short, disbelieving sound. "You're bluffing." "I'm not." "Sienna, this company is your life," David said slowly. "You've spent a decade building it. You can't just walk away because of some parking garage confession from a subordinate employee." "Watch me." Richard stood, his face reddening. "You can't do this. We have shareholders to answer to, investors who expect..." "Then answer to them. That's your job now." Sienna pulled a folded envelope from her bag and placed it on the table. "My formal resignation. I'll vacate my office by the end of the week. You can announce my departure however you see fit, as long as you leave Adrian Cole out of it." "That's not how this works," Margaret snapped. "You don't get to dictate terms." "Hey, I'm not dictating. I'm negotiating. You want me gone without a scandal? Fine. But Adrian doesn't get punished for this. You reverse the transfer, you drop the investigation, and you let him keep his job with no repercussions." "Absolutely not," David said. "He created this mess." "I created this mess," Sienna interrupted, her voice hard as steel. "I'm the CEO. I'm responsible for maintaining professional boundaries. Adrian was just honest about his feelings, which is more than I can say for anyone in this room." Richard's face had gone from red to purple. "You're seriously choosing him over the company you built?" Sienna met his eyes without flinching. "Yes." "You'll regret this." "Maybe. But at least I'll regret something real instead of spending the rest of my life wondering what I gave up for a boardroom full of people who were always going to try to control me anyway." She turned and walked out before anyone could respond, her heels clicking against the marble floor like gunshots. She made it all the way to the elevator before her hands started shaking. The doors closed and Sienna pressed her forehead against the cool metal wall, breathing hard. She just walked away from everything. 10 years of work, billions of dollars. A reputation that had taken blood and sacrifice to build. All of it gone. And for what? For a man she'd known for 6 months? For feelings she couldn't even fully articulate? The elevator reached the parking garage. Sienna stepped out into the fluorescent wasteland where this had all started. And for a moment she just stood there, letting the reality sink in. She was free. Terrifyingly, completely free. Her phone rang. She almost didn't answer, but the caller ID said Adrian Cole, and she couldn't not pick up. "Hey, did you really do it?" His voice was rough, urgent. "Jeremy just texted me. He said there's a rumor you resigned." "It's not a rumor." "Sienna, I walked out, Adrian. I told them I was done, and I left." Silence on the other end. Then, "Why?" "Well, because I meant what I said this morning. I'm done living for them." "You didn't have to quit. We could have figured something out. We could have..." "There was nothing to figure out. They wanted me to choose, so I did." Sienna leaned against her car, suddenly exhausted. "I chose you." Adrian made a sound that was half laugh, half sob. "You're insane." "I know. You just gave up a $1 billion company. I know that too. Sienna, I don't know what to say. Then don't say anything. Just meet me somewhere. Anywhere. I need to see you. Where are you? The parking garage. I'll be there in 20 minutes. Sienna hung up and slid down the side of her car until she was sitting on the concrete floor, her expensive coat pooling around her, her carefully constructed life in pieces. And for the first time in years, she felt like she could breathe. Adrian made it in 15 minutes, parking his beat-up Honda next to her sleek sedan like a visual metaphor for everything wrong with this situation. He got out, saw her sitting on the ground, and immediately dropped down beside her without a word. They sat there in silence for a long time, shoulders touching, two people who'd just blown up their lives and had no idea what came next. Rachel threatened to take Mia, Adrian said finally. Sienna's head snapped toward him. What? She said if I lose my job, she'll file for a custody modification. Says I'm providing an unstable home environment. That's bullshit. Maybe, but she's got lawyers who can make it sound convincing. Adrian rubbed his face. I don't know what to do, Sienna. I can't lose my daughter, but I can't keep pretending I don't feel this. Sienna reached over and took his hand. We'll figure it out. How? You just quit your job. I'm about to lose mine. We're both broke and unemployed and together, Sienna said firmly. You told me that this morning. Remember? We end up together. Maybe that's enough. I was trying to make you feel better. I didn't think you'd actually walk away from your company. Well, I did. So now we both have to live with it. She squeezed his hand. But we're not broke. I may not have a job, but I have savings, investments, enough to keep us afloat while we figure out what's next. Adrian stared at her. I'm not taking your money. It's not charity. Think of it as a partnership. You give me a reason to rebuild. I give you breathing room to deal with Rachel. That's not how this works. Why not? You think because I'm a woman I can't support the man She stopped, her face flushing. Adrian's heart hammered. The man you what? Sienna looked away. Nothing. Forget it. Sienna, it's too soon to say it, okay? We barely know each other, and everything's falling apart, and I don't want to... Adrian kissed her. It wasn't planned. It wasn't smooth. He just turned, cupped her face in his hands, and kissed her like his life depended on it. And for a moment, the parking garage disappeared. The scandal disappeared. The fear and uncertainty disappeared, and there was nothing but the two of them and the reckless, terrifying truth neither of them could keep buried anymore. When they pulled apart, Sienna was crying again. I love you, she whispered. I know it's insane and terrible timing, and we're both disasters, but I love you. Adrian pressed his forehead against hers. I love you too. They stayed like that for a long time, holding each other on the concrete floor of a parking garage. Two broken people who'd somehow found each other in the wreckage. Eventually, they had to move. Sienna had to clean out her office. Adrian had to figure out what to tell HR. They had to face the consequences of what they'd started. But for now, in this moment, they had each other. And maybe that was enough to start rebuilding. The next 3 days were chaos. Sterling Global's press release went out on Wednesday morning. Sienna Vale steps down as CEO to pursue personal ventures. The business world exploded. Reporters camped outside Sienna's building. Stock prices dropped. Investors demanded answers. Sienna ignored all of it. She spent Wednesday packing up her corner office, boxing up awards and contracts and photographs of company milestones that suddenly felt like someone else's life. Her assistant Clara cried. Her CFO threatened to resign in solidarity. The board sent 3 separate emails begging her to reconsider. She deleted them without reading. Adrian, meanwhile, was stuck in a nightmare of HR meetings and legal consultations. Janet Reese called him in again on Wednesday afternoon, her expression a mix of confusion and barely concealed frustration. Mr. Cole, I need you to explain something to me. May Nishmayanamko. Adrian sat. Okay, Ms. Vale resigned yesterday. As part of her exit agreement, she negotiated for you to keep your position with no repercussions. No transfer, no disciplinary action, nothing. Janet leaned back in her chair. Why would she do that? You'd have to ask her. I'm asking you. Then I don't know what to tell you. And Janet studied him for a long moment. You understand this makes you look worse, right? The CEO resigns to protect you, and you expect people to believe nothing inappropriate happened. I don't care what people believe. Well, you should. Because HR can't force you to transfer anymore, but we also can't control what your coworkers think. You're going to spend the next 6 months working in an environment where everyone assumes you slept your way into special treatment. I didn't sleep my way into anything. Again, not the point. Janet pulled off her glasses. Look, off the record, I think you got lucky, Ms. Vale could have thrown you under the bus to save her own reputation, and instead she fell on her sword for you. That's either incredibly noble or incredibly stupid, and I haven't decided which. Can I go? Yes, but Adrian, be careful. Whatever this is between you and Ms. Vale, it's already cost her everything. Don't let it cost you your daughter, too. Adrian left without responding. That night, after Mia was in bed, he sat at his kitchen table with a beer and his phone, scrolling through job listings he couldn't afford to take and apartment listings he couldn't afford to rent. His savings would last maybe 3 months if he was careful. After that, he'd be in serious trouble. His phone buzzed. Sienna, can I come over? Adrian glanced at the clock. Almost 10. Mia was asleep. He should say no. He should keep some distance, some boundary between his life as a father and whatever this thing with Sienna was becoming. Instead, he typed, yes. She showed up 20 minutes later in jeans and a sweater, the first time he'd ever seen her in anything that wasn't a power suit. She looked younger, softer, scared. Hey, Adrian said, stepping aside to let her in. Hey. They stood in his tiny living room, and Sienna looked around like she was seeing his life for the first time. The worn couch. The stack of unpaid bills on the coffee table. The crayon drawings Mia had taped to the fridge. This is where you live, she said quietly. Yeah, it's not much. It's real. Sienna touched one of Mia's drawings, a crooked house with stick figures labeled Daddy and Mia. You have a whole life here, a real one. Real? And I blew into it like a hurricane and destroyed everything. You didn't destroy anything. Adrian, you're about to lose your job. I already talked to HR. I'm keeping it. Sienna turned. What? You negotiated for me to stay. No transfer, no punishment. Janet told me this afternoon. Well, I didn't think they'd actually go through with it. Well, they did. So now I get to spend the next few months being the guy everyone thinks slept with the boss. Adrian managed a weak smile. Should be fun. Sienna's face crumpled. I'm so sorry. Don't. You gave up your company for me. I can handle some office gossip. It's not just gossip. It's your reputation, your career, your... My choice, Adrian interrupted. I told you how I felt, knowing what it would cost. You're not responsible for that. Sienna crossed the room and wrapped her arms around him, pressing her face against his chest. Adrian held her, feeling the tension in her body slowly unwind. I don't know how to do this, she whispered. Do what? Be a person instead of a CEO. I've spent so long performing, controlling everything, making sure I never showed weakness. And now I don't have anything to hide behind, and I'm terrified. Adrian pulled back enough to see her face. You don't have to hide. Not from me. What if you don't like what you see? Sienna, I've already seen you fall apart in a parking garage. Cry in my car and quit your job on impulse. If I was going to run, I would have done it by now. She laughed, watery and broken. You're either very brave or very stupid. Probably both. They stood there holding each other, and for the first time since this whole mess started, Adrian felt like maybe they'd survive it. By Friday, the media circus had reached peak insanity. Business Insider ran a profile titled The Billionaire Who Walked Away. Forbes speculated about Sienna's next move. Twitter exploded with hot takes about women in tech and workplace romance and corporate responsibility. Sienna's phone rang non-stop. Investors, reporters, former colleagues, all wanting a piece of her story. She turned it off and spent the day with Adrian and Mia at the park. Mia had taken to Sienna immediately, which surprised everyone. The 7-year-old peppered her with questions. Why don't you work anymore? Do you like ice cream? Can you braid hair? And Sienna answered each one with surprising patience. I like her, Mia announced as they walked home. She's not like the other ladies Daddy knows. What other ladies? Adrian asked. The ones Grandma tries to make you date at church. Adrian groaned. We're not talking about this. Sienna laughed, and it sounded genuine for the first time in days. That night, after Mia went to bed, Sienna and Adrian sat on his couch, drinking cheap wine and talking about the future like it was something they could actually plan. I've been thinking about starting a consulting firm, Sienna said. Small, independent, help startups navigate corporate structure without selling their souls. That sounds perfect for you. It's a massive step down from running Sterling Global. Or it's a step towards something better. Sienna leaned her head on his shoulder. What about you? Are you going to stay at the company? I don't know. Maybe. At least until I figure out what else I can do. Adrian paused. Rachel's still threatening custody stuff. I can't make any big moves until that's settled. We'll figure it out. Together. You keep saying that. Because I mean it. Sienna laced her fingers through his. I'm not going anywhere, Adrian. Even when this gets hard, and it will get hard, I'm not leaving. You promise? I promise. They sat in comfortable silence, and for the first time since that night in the parking garage, Adrian let himself believe that maybe, just maybe, they'd be okay. But the next morning, everything fell apart again. Adrian's phone rang at 6 a.m. Unknown number. Hello? Mr. Cole? This is Detective Sarah Martinez with the police department. I'm calling about a complaint filed against you by Rachel Cole. Adrian's blood went cold. What kind of complaint? She's alleging that you've created an unsafe environment for your daughter by engaging in a relationship with a former employer who has a history of unstable behavior. She's requesting an emergency custody evaluation. That's insane. Sienna doesn't have a history of... I'm not here to debate the merits of the complaint, Mr. Cole. I'm just informing you that you'll need to appear for a hearing next Wednesday at 9 a.m. You'll want to bring a lawyer. The detective hung up. Adrian sat on the edge of his bed, staring at his phone, feeling like the floor had just dropped out from under him. Rachel wasn't bluffing. She was going to try to take Mia away, and Adrian had no idea how to stop her. Adrian didn't move for a full minute after the detective hung up. He just sat there on the edge of his bed, phone still pressed to his ear, listening to dead air and trying to process what had just happened. Rachel had called the police, filed an official complaint, accused him of creating an unsafe environment for their daughter. His hands started shaking. He'd known she was angry. He'd known she'd threatened custody. But actually filing paperwork involving law enforcement, dragging Mia into a legal battle, that was a line he'd never thought she'd cross. The bedroom door creaked open. Sienna stood in the doorway wearing one of his old t-shirts, her hair messy from sleep, concern etched across her face. Who was that? Adrian couldn't answer. The words stuck in his throat like broken glass. Sienna crossed the room and knelt in front of him, hands on his knees. Adrian, talk to me. Rachel filed a custody complaint. There's a hearing next Wednesday. His voice sounded hollow, distant. She told the police I'm creating an unsafe environment because of you. Sienna's face went white. What? Us? She's saying you have a history of unstable behavior, that I'm putting Mia at risk by being with you. Adrian finally looked at her, and the guilt on her face nearly broke him. I need a lawyer. I need to figure out how to prove that we're not. I'll leave. What? Sienna stood, her expression hardening into something cold and resolved. If I'm the problem, I'll remove myself from the equation. You can tell the court we broke up, that it was a mistake, that... No. Adrian grabbed her wrist. Absolutely not. Adrian, she's threatening to take your daughter, your actual child. I'm not worth that. You don't get to decide what you're worth to me. This isn't about worth, it's about reality. Sienna pulled away, pacing the small bedroom like a caged animal. I walked away from my company thinking it was some grand romantic gesture, but all I did was make everything worse. Now Rachel has ammunition. Now she can point to the billionaire CEO who quit her job on impulse and say, see, unstable, reckless, dangerous for a 7-year-old to be around. Boss? You're not dangerous. Mossini. Tell that to the judge. Sienna stopped pacing, pressing her palms against her eyes. I've ruined your life, Adrian. I've destroyed your career, your reputation, and now your custody arrangement. Everything you touch around me turns to ash. That's not true, isn't it? Name one thing that's gotten better since I confessed my feelings for you in that parking garage. Adrian stood and grabbed her shoulders, forcing her to look at him. Me. I've gotten better. For the first time in 3 years, I'm not just surviving. I'm not just going through the motions for Mia's sake. I'm actually living, and it's because of you. That won't matter to a family court judge. Then we'll make it matter. Adrian's voice was firm now, the shock wearing off and being replaced by something harder. Determination. We'll get a lawyer. We'll prove that our relationship doesn't affect Mia negatively. We'll show them that you're not some unstable wreck. You're a woman who made a difficult choice and is rebuilding her life. With no job, no income, and a scandal following her name. With savings, a business plan, and a future. Adrian squeezed her shoulders. You're not running, Sienna. I won't let you. We fight this together. Sienna's eyes filled with tears. What if we lose? Then we lose. But at least we'll lose together, instead of you disappearing and me spending the rest of my life wondering what we could have been. She kissed him then, hard and desperate, like she was trying to memorize the shape of his mouth in case it was the last time. When they pulled apart, she was crying for real. I'm scared, she whispered. Me too. They stood there holding each other as the sun rose outside. Two people who'd bet everything on a feeling and were about to find out if it was enough. Adrian called in sick to work again. He couldn't face the office, couldn't pretend everything was normal while his entire life hung in the balance. Instead, he spent the morning researching family law attorneys and trying not to panic. Sienna made calls of her own. By noon, she'd lined up 3 lawyer consultations for Adrian and had pulled together character references from former colleagues who owed her favors. She moved through his apartment like a general organizing troops, efficient and focused in a way that would have been intimidating if it wasn't so clearly driven by fear. You don't have to do all this, Adrian said, watching her draft an email to a law professor she'd met at a conference 5 years ago. Yes, I do. This is my fault. It's Rachel's fault. She's the one filing complaints and involving police. Because of me. Sienna hit send and turned to face him. I need you to understand something, Adrian. I've spent my entire adult life controlling outcomes, building systems, making sure every variable was accounted for. And now I'm watching you suffer because of a variable I created, and I can't fix it, and it's killing me. You can't control everything. I know. That's what terrifies me. Before Adrian could respond, his phone rang. His mother. He almost didn't answer. His mom had called twice since the scandal broke, leaving voicemails that ranged from concerned to accusatory. She'd never liked that he'd married Rachel, but she liked the idea of him dating a billionaire CEO even less. But he couldn't avoid her forever. Hi, Mom. Adrian Michael Cole, what the hell is going on? Adrian closed his eyes. It's complicated. Rachel called me this morning. She said you're involved with some woman from work and that she's filing for emergency custody because you're putting Mia at risk. Please tell me she's exaggerating. She's not exaggerating, she's lying. So you're seeing someone? Yes. And this person is from your work? Was from my work. She resigned. Why would she resign? Because the board pressured her to choose between her job and her personal life. And she chose her personal life. Silence on the other end. Then, is this the same woman Rachel's talking about? The one she's claiming is unstable? Sienna's not unstable. Adrian glanced at Sienna, who was watching him with anxious eyes. She's the best thing that's happened to me in years, and Rachel's trying to use her against me. Adrian, I need you to think very carefully about what you're doing. You have a daughter who needs stability. If this woman is causing problems, she's not causing problems, she's trying to help. By quitting her job and triggering a custody battle? By being honest about her feelings, which is more than most people can say. Adrian's voice hardened. I'm not having this conversation, Mom. I called to let you know about the hearing next Wednesday. If you want to support me, great. If not, that's fine too. But I'm not defending Sienna to you or anyone else. He hung up before she could respond. Sienna was staring at him. Your mom hates me. My mom doesn't know you. But she already thinks I'm a problem. Everyone thinks you're a problem. That doesn't make them right. Adrian crossed the room and pulled her into his arms. Stop trying to protect me from consequences I chose. I knew what I was risking when I told you how I felt. I'm not a child, and I'm not a victim. I'm just a guy who fell in love with the wrong woman at the wrong time, and I'm dealing with it. Like that. Wrong woman, Sienna repeated quietly. You know what I mean. Do I? Adrian pulled back to look at her. You're not wrong. The timing was wrong. The circumstances were wrong. But you... He touched her face. You're exactly right. She kissed him again, softer this time, and for a moment the fear receded enough to breathe. The first lawyer consultation was a disaster. David Brennan, a family law specialist with 20 years of experience, sat across from Adrian in a sterile conference room and delivered the bad news with clinical efficiency. Your ex-wife has a strong case, he said, flipping through the complaint Rachel had filed. She's arguing that you've demonstrated poor judgment by engaging in a workplace relationship that resulted in public scandal, job instability, and association with an individual whose recent behavior, resignation, media attention, public controversy, suggests impulsivity and lack of stability. Sienna is not impulsive, Adrian argued. She made a calculated decision to leave a toxic work environment. That's not how a judge will see it. They'll see a billionaire who walked away from her company for a man she barely knows, which supports your ex-wife's narrative of unstable behavior. Sienna, who'd insisted on attending the consultation despite Adrian's protests, spoke up. What if I can demonstrate financial stability? I have significant savings, investments, a business plan. It doesn't matter, Brennan interrupted. You're not the child's parent. The court doesn't care about your finances. They care about whether your presence in Mr. Cole's life creates risk for the minor child. I would never hurt Mia. I'm sure you wouldn't, but that's not what's being argued. Ms. Cole is claiming that your relationship with her ex-husband demonstrates his inability to prioritize his daughter's well-being over his romantic interests. Brennan looked at Adrian, and frankly, the timeline supports that. You confessed feelings for Ms. Vale knowing it would cause professional consequences. Those consequences materialized. Now you're facing unemployment, public scandal, and a custody battle. From the court's perspective, you chose your relationship over your daughter's stability. That's not what happened, Adrian said, his voice tight. It's how it looks, and in family court, perception is reality. Sienna stood abruptly. We need a different lawyer. Brennan raised an eyebrow. You're welcome to seek a second opinion, but I guarantee they'll tell you the same thing. The facts aren't in your favor. Then we change the facts. Ms. Vale, this isn't a corporate negotiation. You can't restructure a custody case like a business deal. Watch me. She walked out of the conference room and Adrian hurried after her, leaving Brennan sitting alone with his files. Out in the hallway, Sienna was pacing again, that manic energy radiating off her in waves. He's wrong, she said. He has to be wrong. Sienna, we'll find another lawyer, someone who actually wants to fight instead of just cataloging all the ways we're screwed. Maybe he's right, though. Maybe the facts aren't in our favor. Sienna stopped pacing and turned on him. So what? We just give up? Let Rachel win because some lawyer with a fancy degree says we don't have a chance? I'm not saying we give up. I'm saying we need to be realistic about... Realistic? Sienna laughed, a harsh sound. I was realistic for 10 years, Adrian. I made realistic choices, built realistic plans, lived a realistic life. And you know what it got me? A corner office I hated, and a penthouse I never wanted to go home to. So forgive me if I'm not interested in being realistic anymore. Adrian grabbed her hand. What are you saying? I'm saying we fight. Not because we think we can win, but because the alternative is unacceptable. Her eyes were fierce now, blazing with the same intensity she'd probably used to stare down boardrooms full of men who underestimated her. Rachel wants to paint me as unstable? Fine. I'll show her what stable looks like. I'll show the court what stable looks like. I'll get my consulting firm off the ground. I'll establish a routine. I'll demonstrate that I'm not some impulsive disaster ruining your life. You're not ruining my life. Then help me prove it. They stood in the hallway of the law office, surrounded by plaques celebrating legal victories and framed degrees promising expertise, and made a decision that probably wasn't smart but felt necessary anyway. They were going to fight. The second lawyer was better. Maria Santos had handled dozens of custody cases, specialized in defending fathers' rights, and didn't waste time sugarcoating the situation. "You're in trouble," she said bluntly, sitting across from Adrian and Sienna in her cluttered office. "But it's not insurmountable. We need to build a counter-narrative that positions you as a devoted father who made an adult decision about his personal life, and that decision doesn't negatively impact your daughter." "How do we do that?" Adrian asked. "Character witnesses? Documentation of your parenting? Evidence that Mia is thriving despite the professional turbulence?" Maria looked at Sienna. "And we need to humanize you. Right now, you're the billionaire CEO who caused a scandal. We need to turn you into the successful professional who made a difficult career transition and is supporting a single father through a vindictive custody battle. Will that work? It might. But you need to understand, family court judges are conservative. They don't like drama, they don't like instability, and they really don't like workplace romances that make headlines. You're fighting an uphill battle." "I'm used to uphill battles," Sienna said. Maria smiled slightly. "I can see that. All right, here's what we're going to do as." She laid out a strategy that was part legal defense, part public relations campaign. Adrian would document every interaction with Mia, school pickups, homework help, bedtime routines. Sienna would formalize her consulting business, open an office, establish professional credibility. They'd gather statements from teachers, neighbors, anyone who could testify that Mia was happy, healthy, and well cared for. And they'd avoid any public displays of their relationship until after the hearing. No social media posts, no public appearances together, nothing that could be used to suggest you're prioritizing romance over parenting, Maria said firmly. "I know it's not fair, but we need to control the narrative." Adrian nodded. "Whatever it takes." "Good. The hearing is in 5 days. That's not a lot of time, but we'll make it work." They left Maria's office with a plan and something that felt almost like hope. Over the next 3 days, Adrian became obsessed with documentation. He photographed every meal he made for Mia, every homework assignment they completed together, every bedtime story he read. He got statements from her teacher, her soccer coach, the neighbor who sometimes watched her when Adrian was running late. Everyone said the same thing. Mia was a happy, well-adjusted kid. Adrian was a devoted father. Whatever was happening in his personal life wasn't affecting his daughter negatively. Rachel, meanwhile, was building her own case. Adrian heard through mutual friends that she'd hired a private investigator to document his movements, that she'd contacted Mia's pediatrician asking about missed appointments, there were none, that she was preparing to paint him as a man who'd abandoned stability for infatuation. It was brutal. Sienna threw herself into work with the same intensity she'd once applied to running Sterling Global. She registered her consulting business, set up a website, reached out to former contacts about potential clients. Within 72 hours, she had 3 meetings scheduled and a business plan that would have impressed any investor. But the strain was showing. She wasn't sleeping. She was living on coffee and adrenaline, pushing herself to prove something that shouldn't have needed proving, that she was competent, stable, worthy of being in Adrian's life. On Tuesday night, the day before the hearing, Adrian found her sitting at his kitchen table at 2 a.m, staring at her laptop with hollow eyes. "Come to bed," he said quietly. "I need to finish this proposal." "Sienna, it's 2 a.m. You need sleep." "I need to prove I'm not a disaster." Her voice cracked. "I need to walk into that courtroom tomorrow and show Rachel and the judge and everyone else that I'm not some impulsive wreck who ruined your life." Adrian closed her laptop. "You're going to burn out." "I can't afford to burn out, not when Mia's future is on the line. Mia's future is on the line because Rachel's being vindictive, not because of you. But I'm the excuse she's using." Sienna looked up at him, and her eyes were red-rimmed and exhausted. "If I wasn't in the picture, Rachel wouldn't have grounds for this complaint. You'd still have your peaceful life, your stable job, your uncomplicated custody arrangement. I'm the variable that broke everything." Adrian knelt beside her chair. "You didn't break anything. You just exposed cracks that were already there. Rachel was always going to use Mia as leverage whenever she felt like I was moving on. The job at Sterling Global was always going to be toxic. My life was always going to feel hollow, as long as I was pretending to be fine instead of actually trying to be happy. He took her hands. You didn't break me. You woke me up. Sienna started crying, the kind of deep, shaking sobs she'd been holding back for days. Adrian pulled her out of the chair and held her while she fell apart, whispering reassurances he hoped were true. Eventually, she exhausted herself. They went to bed, and Sienna fell asleep in his arms, her breathing finally evening out into something peaceful. Adrian lay awake, staring at the ceiling, thinking about the hearing in 7 hours and wondering if love was ever really enough to overcome the practical realities of custody battles and vindictive ex-wives, and a world that punished people for choosing happiness over safety. He still didn't have an answer when dawn broke. The courthouse was a gray concrete building that looked designed to drain hope from anyone who entered. Adrian and Sienna met Maria Santos in the lobby, both of them dressed conservatively, Adrian in the one suit he owned that still fit, Sienna in a simple black dress that made her look professional instead of powerful. "Remember," Maria said as they walked toward the courtroom, "let me do the talking. Answer questions directly, but don't volunteer information. And whatever happens, stay calm." Rachel was already there with her lawyer, a sharp-faced woman named Catherine Voss, who had a reputation for destroying fathers in custody hearings. Rachel looked composed, almost serene, like she'd already won. She probably thought she had. The judge was a stern-looking man in his 60s named Howard Pierce. He'd been on the family court bench for 20 years and had a reputation for no-nonsense rulings that favored stability over sentimentality. Not exactly ideal for Adrian's case. The hearing started with Rachel's lawyer laying out the complaint. Catherine Voss painted a picture of Adrian as a man who'd become so consumed by a workplace affair that he'd lost sight of his responsibilities as a father. She cited the scandal at Sterling Global, Sienna's resignation, the media attention, the professional instability. "Your Honor, Mr. Cole has demonstrated a pattern of poor judgment that directly impacts his ability to provide a stable home for his daughter," Catherine said. "He engaged in a relationship with his superior that violated workplace policies, resulted in public scandal, and led to both parties losing their employment. This is not the behavior of a responsible parent." Maria stood to respond. "Your Honor, Mr. Cole made an adult decision about his personal life that has no bearing on his ability to parent his daughter. He has documentation showing consistent, devoted care for Mia, school attendance records, medical appointments, extracurricular activities. His personal relationship with Ms. Vale does not diminish his capacity as a father." Judge Pierce looked unimpressed. "Ms. Santos, the concern isn't whether Mr. Cole loves his daughter. It's whether his judgment in romantic relationships creates an unstable environment. Ms. Vale is a successful professional who made a difficult career transition. She's not unstable. She's rebuilding. She resigned from a billion-dollar company after less than a year in a relationship with a subordinate employee," Catherine interjected. "That demonstrates impulsivity at best, instability at worst." Adrian's hands clenched into fists under the table. He wanted to stand up, to defend Sienna, to explain that her resignation wasn't impulsive but courageous. But Maria had warned him to stay quiet unless asked a direct question. Judge Pierce turned to Rachel. "Ms. Cole, can you elaborate on your specific concerns regarding your daughter's welfare?" Rachel stood, and Adrian's stomach churned. Rachel stood, and she'd always been good at performing concern, at weaponizing maternal instinct to get what she wanted. "Your Honor, I'm not trying to punish Adrian for moving on. I'm trying to protect Mia from the chaos that's entered her life since he began this relationship." Rachel's voice was steady, reasonable. In the past month, her father has been the subject of workplace investigations, public scandal, and professional instability. He's introduced her to a woman who quit her job on impulse and has no stable employment. And he's made it clear that he's willing to risk everything, including his career and financial security, for this relationship. That's not the stability a 7-year-old needs. "Has Mia expressed distress about these changes?" the judge asked. "Not directly, but children don't always communicate distress verbally, especially when they're trying to protect a parent they love." Adrian nearly stood up at that. Mia wasn't distressed. She was happy. She liked Sienna. She was thriving despite the adult drama swirling around her. But before he could speak, Maria called her first witness, Mia's teacher, Mrs. Patterson. The older woman testified that Mia was doing well academically, had good friendships, and showed no signs of emotional distress. Her homework was completed on time. She participated enthusiastically in class, and she often talked about her father with obvious affection. Has Mia mentioned Ms. Vale? Catherine asked on cross-examination. She has. She seems to like her. Did she mention that Ms. Vale quit her job recently? I don't recall. Did she mention media attention or workplace scandal? No, Mia talks about normal 7-year-old things. Her friends, her soccer games, books she's reading. It was a small victory, but it mattered. Next, Maria called the neighbor who sometimes watched Mia. She testified that Adrian was a devoted father who always made his daughter the priority, even during the recent professional turbulence. Then Sienna took the stand. Adrian's heart hammered as she was sworn in. This was the moment everything could fall apart. If Sienna came across as defensive or emotional or unstable, Rachel would win. But when Maria asked her first question, Sienna's voice was steady. Ms. Vale, can you describe your current professional situation? I recently resigned as CEO of Sterling Global to pursue independent consulting work. I've registered my business, developed a client base, and am in the process of establishing a full-time practice. Why did you resign? Because I was being pressured to choose between my professional role and my personal life. I chose personal integrity over corporate politics. Do you have a romantic relationship with Mr. Cole? Yes. How would you characterize that relationship? What? Sienna looked directly at the judge. It's serious. It's built on mutual respect, shared values, and genuine affection. And it has absolutely no negative impact on his daughter. Catherine Voss stood. Ms. Vale, you quit a billion-dollar company after knowing Mr. Cole for less than 6 months. Would you characterize that as impulsive? No. I'd characterize it as prioritizing what matters. What matters more than a career you spent a decade building? Happiness, authenticity, a life that isn't dictated by people who see me as a corporate asset instead of a human being. So you're admitting you made an emotional decision rather than a rational one. I'm admitting I made a decision based on what I value, which includes emotional well-being alongside financial success. Catherine pressed harder. Ms. Vale, you have no children of your own, correct? Correct? No experience parenting or understanding the needs of a 7-year-old child? I have plenty of experience understanding what children need. Stability, love, and adults who model healthy relationships instead of toxic ones. Is that a criticism of Ms. Cole? It's an observation about priorities. The cross-examination went on for another 20 minutes, Catherine trying to paint Sienna as reckless and inexperienced, while Sienna held her ground with quiet dignity. By the time she stepped down, Adrian couldn't tell if she'd helped or hurt their case. Finally, Adrian testified. Maria walked him through his daily routine with Mia, school pickups, homework help, bedtime stories. She had him describe how his relationship with Sienna had developed, how carefully he'd considered the implications before acting on his feelings. Mr. Cole, do you believe your relationship with Ms. Vale has negatively impacted your daughter? No. Mia is happy. She's doing well in school. She likes Sienna. And she sees me being honest about my feelings instead of hiding them, which I think is a valuable lesson. Catherine's cross-examination was brutal. Mr. Cole, you were aware that confessing romantic feelings to your superior could result in professional consequences, correct? Yes. And you did it anyway, knowing those consequences could affect your ability to provide for your daughter? I believe the consequences would be manageable, but they weren't. You've been transferred, investigated, and publicly humiliated. Your girlfriend quit her job. You're both now facing unemployment and scandal. Does that sound manageable? It sounds like we're handling a difficult situation the best we can. By putting your romantic interests ahead of your daughter's stability? I didn't put anything ahead of Mia. She's always been my priority. Yes. Then why did you risk your career for a woman you barely knew? Because I'm allowed to have a life outside of being a father. I'm allowed to fall in love. And doing those things doesn't make me a bad parent. Catherine smiled coldly. We'll let the judge decide that. After both sides rested, Judge Pierce announced he'd issue a ruling within 48 hours. The courtroom emptied slowly. Adrian felt numb, disconnected from his body. Maria said something about how it went as well as could be expected, but Adrian barely heard her. Outside on the courthouse steps, Sienna grabbed his hand. We did everything we could, she said quietly. What if it's not enough? Then we appeal. We fight harder. We don't give up, Pete. Adrian pulled her into his arms, not caring who saw, and held on like she was the only solid thing in a world that kept trying to pull him under. 2 days later, the ruling came. Adrian was at work when Maria called. He stepped into an empty conference room to take it, his heart pounding so hard he thought he might pass out. What did he say? Maria's voice was carefully neutral. Judge Pierce ruled in Rachel's favor. The floor dropped out. He's granting her primary custody? Adrian could barely get the words out. No. He's ordering a temporary modification. You'll have supervised visitation for the next 3 months while a court-appointed psychologist evaluates the situation. If the evaluation is positive, you'll return to the original custody agreement. If not, Rachel gets full custody. That's the concern, yes. Adrian sank into a chair. This is insane. I'm a good father. I've done everything right. I know. But Pierce was concerned about the instability. He wants to ensure Mia's welfare is protected while things settle down. How do I explain this to Mia? How do I tell her she can only see me with a supervisor present, like I'm some kind of threat? Is very carefully. And Adrian, this isn't over. The evaluation process could work in your favor, but you need to be prepared for 3 months of limited contact. Adrian hung up and sat in the empty conference room, staring at the wall, feeling like he'd been gutted. He'd lost. Not completely, not permanently, but he'd lost. And he had no idea how to tell his daughter that her world was about to change because her father had fallen in love with the wrong person at the wrong time. Adrian sat in that conference room for 20 minutes after Maria hung up, trying to figure out how to stand without his legs giving out. Through the glass walls, he could see coworkers moving past, living their normal lives, completely unaware that his had just collapsed. Supervised visitation. 3 months. A court-appointed psychologist poking through every aspect of his parenting to determine if he was fit to be alone with his own daughter. His phone buzzed. A text from Rachel. Judge made the right call. Maybe now you'll think about what matters. Adrian wanted to throw his phone through the window. Instead, he shoved it in his pocket and walked out of the conference room on autopilot. Jeremy from IT tried to catch his attention about something, but Adrian kept walking, past the cubicles and the break room and the receptionist, who was definitely whispering about him to someone on the phone. He made it to his car before he fell apart. Not crying, just sitting there with his hands on the steering wheel, breathing hard, trying to process the fact that he'd have to pick Mia up from school today and tell her that their lives were changing again. That some stranger would be watching them during visits to make sure Daddy wasn't dangerous. That Rachel had won, at least for now. His phone rang. Sienna, did you hear? His voice came out rough. Maria called me. Adrian, I'm so sorry. It's not your fault. It is, though. Pierce wouldn't have ruled this way if I wasn't. Don't. Adrian cut her off. Don't finish that sentence. We've been over this. Silence on the other end. Then, where are you? My car, work parking lot. Stay there. I'm coming to you. You don't have to. But she'd already hung up. Sienna showed up 15 minutes later in her own car, parking next to him and climbing into his passenger seat without asking. She didn't say anything at first, just reached over and took his hand. They sat like that for a while. Two people who'd gambled everything and lost, holding on to each other because it was the only thing that still made sense. I have to tell Mia today, Adrian said finally. Rachel's lawyer already sent the visitation schedule. First supervised visit is Saturday. Some court-appointed monitor is going to sit in my living room and watch me be a father to my own kid. That's barbaric. That's family court. Adrian laughed bitterly. 3 months of proving I'm not a danger to my daughter because I fell in love with you. What? I'm passé. You can still walk away, Sienna said quietly. Tell the psychologist we broke up. Show them you're prioritizing Mia. Get your custody back. And then what? Spend the rest of my life wondering what we could have been? You'd have your daughter. I'd have half my daughter on a court-mandated schedule. I'd still be trapped in the same pattern, going through the motions, pretending to be fine, never actually risking anything real. Adrian squeezed her hand. Rachel didn't file this complaint because she's worried about Mia. She filed it because she can't stand the idea of me being happy without her. And if I cave now, she wins. Not just custody, everything. So what do? We survived the next 3 months. We aced the psych evaluation, and we proved that choosing each other doesn't make us bad people. It makes us human. Sienna leaned over and kissed him, soft and desperate. I love you. I love you too, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. Adrian picked Mia up from school at 3. She bounced into the car with her backpack and a drawing she'd made in art class. Stick figures labeled Daddy, Mia, and Sienna standing in front of a lopsided house. Look what I made! Adrian's chest tightened. That's beautiful, sweetheart. Can we show Sienna? Is she coming over tonight? Actually, we need to talk about that, about some changes that are happening. Mia's smile faded. What kind of changes? Adrian pulled into a parking lot and turned to face her, 7 years old. Too young to understand family court politics and custody battles and the ways adults use children as weapons. Your mom is worried about some stuff that's been going on with my job and with Sienna. She asked a judge to make sure you're okay, which is good. We both want you to be okay. But it means for the next little while, when you visit me, there's going to be another person there too. Someone who just wants to see that we're doing good together. Mia's face scrunched up in confusion. Like a babysitter? Sort of, but not really. More like someone making sure I'm being a good dad. You're already a good dad. Adrian's throat closed up. Thank you, baby. But sometimes adults have to prove things even when they shouldn't have to. Is it because of Sienna? It's because your mom and I disagree about some things. But it's going to be okay. We're going to do our visits, show the nice lady that we have fun together, and then things will go back to normal. Will Sienna still be there? Not during our visits, but she's not going anywhere. She still cares about you a lot. Mia was quiet for a moment, processing. Then, Mom said Sienna makes bad choices. Adrian's hands tightened on the steering wheel. When did she say that? Last week. She said you make bad choices too now because of Sienna. Mia looked up at him with worried eyes. Did you make a bad choice, Daddy? No, sweetheart. I made a choice that some people don't understand. But it wasn't bad. It was just hard. Do you love Sienna? Yes? Then it's not a bad choice. Mia said it with the simple certainty of childhood, like love was the only metric that mattered. Adrian pulled her into a hug and held on tight, thinking about how much easier life would be if adults could see the world the way 7-year-olds did. The first supervised visit was Saturday morning. Adrian cleaned his apartment like he was preparing for an inspection, which, in a way, he was. He hid the stack of unpaid bills on the coffee table, put fresh sheets on Mia's bed, made sure the fridge was stocked with healthy food, and not just frozen dinners and beer. The court monitor arrived at 9 sharp. Her name was Patricia Holbrook, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and a clipboard that made Adrian's stomach churn. She explained the process. She'd observe their interaction, take notes, and file a report with the court psychologist. She wouldn't interfere unless there was a safety concern. Just act natural, Patricia said, which was the most unnatural instruction Adrian had ever received. Mia showed up at 9:30 with Rachel, who didn't bother coming inside. She just dropped Mia at the door with a pointed look at Patricia, as if to say, "See? I was right to worry." For the first hour, Adrian was stiff, hyper-aware of every word, every gesture. He helped Mia with a puzzle, made her favorite breakfast, chocolate chip pancakes, and tried to ignore the woman sitting on his couch, writing observations about whether he was cutting the pancakes into appropriately sized pieces. But gradually, he relaxed. Because Mia was herself, chattering about school, showing him a dance she'd learned, asking if they could watch a movie later. And Adrian fell into the familiar rhythm of being her dad, which he'd been doing successfully for 7 years and didn't need supervision to accomplish. Patricia stayed for 3 hours, then packed up her things with a neutral expression that gave nothing away. "Thank you for your cooperation, Mr. Cole. I'll be filing my report early next week." After she left, Adrian sat on the couch feeling like he'd just performed in a play he hadn't auditioned for. Mia climbed into his lap. "That wasn't so bad." "No?" "She seemed nice, and she said I was well behaved." "You're always well behaved." "Not always. Remember when I drew on the wall?" Adrian smiled despite himself. "That was 2 years ago, and you were 5. You're allowed to make mistakes." "Is that what you did? Made a mistake with Sienna?" "No, baby. What I did with Sienna was take a risk, and sometimes risks don't work out the way you hope, but that doesn't make them mistakes." Mia thought about that. "Can I see Sienna soon? After the 3 months are up and things go back to normal." "That's a long time." "I know, but she's not going anywhere. She promised." Ishk. Over the next 2 months, Adrian fell into a new routine. Supervised visits every Saturday. Weekly sessions with the court psychologist, Dr. Ellen Reeves, who asked probing questions about his relationship with Sienna, his parenting philosophy, his ability to balance romantic interests with parental responsibilities. Work during the week, where people had mostly stopped whispering but hadn't stopped judging. And every night, Sienna. She'd moved into his apartment unofficially, keeping her penthouse for appearances, but spending most nights on his couch or in his bed, working on her laptop while he helped Mia with homework over video calls. Her consulting business was taking off faster than either of them expected. She'd landed 2 major clients and was fielding inquiries from startups that wanted her expertise without the corporate baggage. "You're good at this," Adrian said one night, watching her review a contract proposal. "At what?" "Building something from nothing. You did it with Sterling Global, and you're doing it again." Sienna closed her laptop. "Sterling Global nearly killed me. This is different." "How?" "Because I'm not doing it to prove anything to anyone except myself. And you." She moved closer to him on the couch. "How was your session with Dr. Reeves today?" "Fine. She asked about my childhood, my relationship with Rachel, whether I have anger management issues." "Do you?" "Apparently not. I'm frustratingly well-adjusted according to her notes." "That must be disappointing for Rachel." Adrian laughed. "She's been pushing for the psychologist to find something wrong. But there's nothing to find. I'm just a guy who loves his kid and fell in love with someone Rachel doesn't approve of." "Have you heard anything about the final evaluation?" "Po?" "Always. Not yet. It's scheduled for next week." Adrian pulled Sienna against his side. 3 months. We made it 3 months. Barely. Barely still counts." They sat in comfortable silence, and for the first time since the hearing, Adrian let himself hope that maybe the worst was behind them. The final evaluation session was on a Tuesday. Dr. Reeves had already interviewed Mia separately, talked to Rachel, reviewed Patricia's reports from the supervised visits. This was Adrian's last chance to make his case. He sat across from Dr. Reeves in her office, which was decorated with abstract art and inspirational posters about resilience, and tried not to fidget. "Mr. Cole, I've reviewed all the documentation, and I want to be clear with you about my findings." Adrian's stomach dropped. "Okay." "Your ex-wife raised concerns about instability, poor judgment, and prioritizing romantic interests over parental responsibilities. After 3 months of observation, I found no evidence supporting those concerns." Adrian blinked. "What?" "You're a devoted father. Mia is thriving. Your relationship with Ms. Vale appears to be stable and supportive, not volatile or harmful. And while your professional situation has been challenging, you've handled it responsibly." Dr. Reeves leaned back in her chair. "I'm recommending to Judge Pierce that the original custody agreement be reinstated immediately." Relief hit Adrian so hard he couldn't speak for a moment. You're sure?" "I don't make recommendations lightly. Your ex-wife's complaint was based on hypothetical concerns, not actual evidence of harm. And frankly, I think she weaponized the court system to punish you for moving on, which is unfortunately common in contentious divorces. So I get Mia back?" "Assuming Judge Pierce accepts my recommendation, yes. You should hear something within the week." Adrian left Dr. Reeves' office feeling lighter than he had in months. He called Sienna from the parking lot. "She's recommending reinstatement." Sienna's sharp intake of breath was audible. "Adrian, that's incredible." We did it. We survived. You survived. You fought for your daughter, and you won. We won, Adrian corrected. You were there every step. You helped me prepare for sessions. You kept me sane when I wanted to give up. I loved you. That's all I did. That's everything. Judge Pierce accepted Dr. Reeves' recommendation 2 days later. The supervised visitation order was lifted, and the original custody agreement was reinstated effective immediately. Rachel was furious. She sent Adrian a string of angry texts accusing him of manipulating the psychologist, playing the victim, choosing Sienna over their daughter. He deleted them without responding. The first weekend Adrian had Mia back without supervision, they didn't do anything special. Just normal Saturday things, grocery shopping, park visit, movie night. But it felt like a victory. Sunday afternoon, Sienna came over for the first time in 3 months. Mia answered the door and threw herself at Sienna with the enthusiasm of a kid who'd been told she couldn't see someone she cared about and was making up for lost time. I missed you. Sienna hugged her back, eyes bright. I missed you too, kiddo. Daddy said you were busy with work, but I knew it was because of the judge stuff. Mia, Adrian started. It's okay. Daddy, I'm not a baby. I know what supervised visitation means. Mia grabbed Sienna's hand. Come see my room. I got new posters. Sienna followed her down the hall. Sienna. And Adrian stood in his tiny living room, feeling like maybe, possibly, they'd turned a corner. That night after Mia went to bed, Adrian and Sienna sat on the couch drinking cheap wine and talking about the future like it was something they could actually plan without everything exploding. I got offered a contract with a major tech firm, Sienna said. 6-month consulting engagement, good money, interesting work. That's amazing. It would mean travel. Meetings in San Francisco and Seattle, probably a week or 2 out of every month. Adrian's chest tightened slightly. That's a lot of time away. I know, but it's also a chance to really establish the business. Build a client base that can sustain long term. Sienna looked at him. I wanted to talk to you before I accepted. Make sure you're okay with it. It's your career. You don't need my permission. I'm not asking for permission. I'm asking if you're okay with it. Adrian thought about that. 3 months ago, the idea of Sienna traveling constantly would have felt like abandonment, like she was choosing work over them. But now, after everything they'd survived, it just felt like life. I'm okay with it, as long as you come back. Always. They kissed, and it felt different than before. Less desperate, more settled. Like they'd weathered the storm and were finally standing on solid ground. Over the next few months, their lives stabilized in ways Adrian hadn't thought possible. Sienna's consulting business thrived. She traveled for work, but always made it back for weekends with Adrian and Mia. Rachel grudgingly accepted the custody arrangement and stopped filing complaints, though she made her disapproval clear at every drop-off. Mia started 3rd grade and announced she wanted to play soccer. Sienna came to every game she was in town for, cheering louder than any of the other parents. Adrian got a promotion at work, nothing major, just a step up with better pay and less gossip. People had mostly moved on to other scandals, other drama, and slowly, quietly, Adrian and Sienna built a life that looked nothing like either of them had planned, but felt more real than anything they'd known before. One Saturday in November, 6 months after the custody hearing, Sienna suggested they all go to the park. It was cold, the kind of gray autumn day where the wind cut through jackets and the leaves were mostly gone from the trees. But Mia wanted to feed the ducks, so they bundled up and went. Adrian stood by the pond watching Mia throw bread to the ducks, while Sienna stood beside him, shoulder pressed against his. I've been thinking, Sienna said. Dangerous. She elbowed him. I've been thinking about selling the penthouse. Adrian turned to look at her. What? I never use it. It's just this expensive monument to a life I don't want anymore. And I was thinking, what if I sold it and bought something else? Something with a yard for Mia, space for an office. Maybe a garage for your car so it doesn't die in the street during winter. You want to buy a house? I want to buy our house. Sienna met his eyes. I know it's fast. I know we've only been together less than a year, and most of that was pure chaos. But I don't want to keep splitting my time between your apartment and a penthouse I hate. I want to build something permanent. With you. Adrian's heart was pounding. What are you saying? I'm saying move in with me. Or let me move in with you. Or let's find somewhere new and move in together. She grabbed his hand. I'm saying I'm done pretending this is temporary. I want forever. Adrian looked over at Mia, who was laughing at a duck trying to steal bread from another duck. 7 years old and already so much smarter than either of her parents. She looked up, caught Adrian staring, and waved. What do you think, Mia? Adrian called. Should Sienna move in with us? Mia's face lit up. Yes. Then she can help with my homework, and we can have movie nights every week. And I think that's a yes, Sienna said softly. Adrian pulled her into a kiss that made Mia groan loudly about how gross adults were, but she was smiling when they pulled apart. That night, after Mia was asleep, Adrian and Sienna lay in his bed, the same bed where he'd once stared at the ceiling wondering if love was worth the cost, and talked about houses and futures and all the ways their lives had imploded and rebuilt into something better. I can't believe we made it, Sienna whispered. I can. You're the most stubborn person I've ever met. Takes one to know one. Adrian kissed her forehead. Thank you. For what? For not running when it got hard. For fighting for us. For loving me, even when it cost you everything. You're worth everything, Sienna said simply. They fell asleep tangled together. Two people who'd gambled their entire lives on a feeling and somehow, impossibly, won. 3 weeks later, they found a house. Nothing extravagant. A modest 3-bedroom in a good school district with a yard big enough for Mia to run around in and a finished basement Sienna could convert into an office. It needed work. The kind of cosmetic updates that would take months and weekends full of paint and frustration. It was perfect. Sienna bought it outright, which Adrian argued about for exactly 5 minutes before realizing she was going to do it anyway, and he should save his energy for battles he could actually win. They moved in right before Christmas. Mia got her own room, finally, decorated in purple and gold because she was going through a phase where everything had to match. Sienna set up her office in the basement and hung her diplomas on the wall like she was establishing territory. Adrian unpacked boxes and assembled furniture and tried not to think about how domestic this all was. How normal. How completely different from the disaster he'd expected 6 months ago. Rachel picked Mia up for Christmas Eve, and for the first time, she looked at the house, at Sienna standing in the doorway with paint in her hair from redoing the kitchen cabinets, and didn't say anything cruel. Just a quiet, nice place. It wasn't forgiveness, but it wasn't war either. After Rachel drove away, Adrian found Sienna standing in what would eventually be a proper living room, but was currently full of unpacked boxes and furniture they hadn't figured out where to put yet. You okay? He asked. Yeah, just thinking. About? About how a year ago I was sleeping in a penthouse I hated, running a company that was draining my soul, and pretending I didn't want more than quarterly earnings and board approval. Sienna turned to face him. And now I'm standing in a half-renovated house with a man I love and his daughter who actually seems to like me, and I'm happier than I've ever been. Even though everything fell apart? Especially because everything fell apart. Falling apart was the only way to rebuild into something real. Adrian crossed the room and pulled her close. I love you. I love you too, even when you're being sappy. Especially when I'm being sappy. They stood there in the chaos of their new house, holding each other and listening to the sound of their future being built one unpacked box at a time. Christmas morning, Mia woke them up at 6, demanding presents and hot chocolate. They stumbled downstairs, Sienna in one of Adrian's old shirts, Adrian in pajama pants. Mia had picked out that had cartoon dinosaurs on them, and watched her tear through presents with the single-minded enthusiasm of an 8-year-old who'd been very good all year. Later, after the wrapping paper was cleaned up, and Mia was occupied with her new art supplies, Adrian found a small box under the tree he didn't recognize. What's this? Sienna looked up from her coffee. Open it. Inside was a key on a simple keychain. No label, no explanation. It's the spare key to the house, Sienna said. I know you already have one, obviously, but I wanted you to have this one. As a reminder that this isn't my house or your house, it's ours, together. Adrian's throat closed up. You're going to make me cry on Christmas. You cried during the Pixar movie last week. You cry at everything. That fish was separated from his dad. It was emotional. Sienna laughed and kissed him, and Mia made exaggerated gagging noises from across the room, And it was messy and imperfect and exactly what Adrian had been missing his entire life without knowing it. That afternoon, Adrian's mother called. They'd been talking more since the custody hearing, tentatively, carefully, rebuilding a relationship that had frayed when Adrian's life exploded. She'd met Sienna twice now and hadn't said anything overtly critical, which for Adrian's mother was basically a glowing endorsement. "Merry Christmas," she said when Adrian answered. "Merry Christmas, Mom. How's the house?" "Chaotic. We're still unpacking." "And Sienna?" "Yeah. She's good. She's here. We're having a nice day." A pause, then, "I was wrong about her." Adrian nearly dropped the phone. "What?" "When you first told me about her, I thought she was going to ruin your life, drag you into some corporate scandal and disappear when things got hard. But she didn't. She stayed. She fought for you." His mother's voice softened. "That's not nothing, Adrian." "No, it's not. I'm happy for you. Truly, you deserve to be happy." After they hung up, Adrian found Sienna in the kitchen making hot chocolate for Mia. "My mom says she was wrong about you." Sienna raised an eyebrow. "Hell freezing over?" "Apparently. She said you fought for us." "I did. I'd do it again." Sienna handed him a mug, though ideally without the custody battle and public humiliation next time. "Agreed." They clinked mugs, and somewhere in the other room, Mia started singing along to a Christmas song playing on the radio, off-key and enthusiastic. This was it, Adrian thought. This was the life he had risked everything for. Not perfect, not easy, but real in a way nothing else had ever been. And for the first time in years, he wasn't just surviving, he was living. Spring came slowly that year, melting the frozen edges of their new life one careful day at a time. The house renovations continued in fits and starts. A weekend spent painting the dining room, an afternoon wrestling with cabinet hardware that didn't fit, a Tuesday evening when Sienna accidentally drilled through a water pipe, and they both stood in the basement watching water spray everywhere, laughing until they couldn't breathe. Mia turned 8 in March. They threw her a birthday party in the backyard, inviting kids from her class and their parents, most of whom Adrian barely knew. He'd been anxious about it, worried that the parents had heard about the scandal, that they'd judge him for the custody battle, for dating his former boss, for all the ways his life had been publicly messy. But nobody said anything. They ate cake, watched kids run around screaming, made small talk about soccer schedules and school fundraisers. Normal parent things. Like Adrian was just another dad instead of the guy who'd made headlines for falling in love in a parking garage. Sienna spent most of the party in the kitchen with 2 other mothers, talking about startup funding and marketing strategies. One of them owned a small bakery. The other ran a boutique consulting firm. By the end of the afternoon, Sienna had 2 new clients and an invitation to join a local business networking group. "You're good at this," Adrian said later after everyone had left and they were cleaning up paper plates and deflated balloons. "At what?" "Talking to people. At building community. You spent a decade in corporate isolation, and now you're making friends at a kid's birthday party." Sienna smiled, tossing plastic forks into the trash. "Turns out I like people when they're not trying to steal my company or undermine my authority. Who knew?" Mia ran up, frosting smeared across her face. "That was the best birthday ever. Can we do it again next week?" "That's not how birthdays work, sweetheart," Adrian said. "Why not?" "Oh, because then they wouldn't be special." Mia considered this, then shrugged and ran back to play with the new soccer ball she'd gotten as a gift. Adrian watched her go. This kid who'd survived her parents' divorce and a custody battle and constant upheaval and somehow come through it happy. "She's resilient," Sienna said quietly, reading his thoughts. "She shouldn't have to be." "Maybe not, but she is, and that's something." Sienna leaned against him. "Kids are tougher than we give them credit for. They adapt, they forgive, they move forward when adults are still stuck fighting old battles." Adrian thought about Rachel, who still made every custody exchange uncomfortable with pointed comments and cold silence. She hadn't accepted his relationship with Sienna, probably never would, but she'd stopped fighting it, which was close enough to peace. "You think we'll ever be friends?" Adrian asked. "Me and Rachel?" "Honestly, probably not. But you don't have to be friends to be good co-parents. You just have to both love Mia more than you hate each other." "I don't hate her. I know. That's why you'll be fine." In April, Sienna's consulting business hit a major milestone, her first $1 million contract with a tech startup that needed help scaling operations. She came home that day with champagne and Thai food, announcing the news like she'd won the lottery. "We're celebrating," she declared, popping the bottle before Adrian could even process what she'd said. $1 million? Sienna, that's insane, I know. 6 months ago, I was unemployed and publicly humiliated, and now I'm closing deals that rival what I was making as CEO. She poured 2 glasses, handed one to Adrian. To falling apart spectacularly and rebuilding even better. They clinked glasses, and Adrian marveled at this woman who'd walked away from a billion-dollar empire and somehow built something just as valuable on her own terms. "You could have stayed at Sterling Global," he said, "weathered the scandal, kept your company, kept your reputation intact, and spent the rest of my life wondering if I'd made the right choice? No thanks." Sienna took a sip of champagne. "Besides, this is better. I answer to myself. I choose my clients. I work on projects I actually care about instead of whatever maximizes shareholder value. And I get to come home to you every night instead of an empty penthouse." "Ichimo? You don't miss it at all? The power? Sometimes. The prestige? Occasionally. But the loneliness? The constant performance? The feeling like I was trapped in a life I'd built but never wanted?" She shook her head. "Not even a little." They ordered pizza for Mia and spent the evening on the couch, Sienna's laptop open as she showed Adrian the contract details and the plans for how this project would shape her company's future. Her eyes were bright, animated in a way they'd never been when she talked about Sterling Global. This was what happiness looked like, Adrian thought. Not the absence of problems, but the presence of purpose. Not perfection, but progress. In May, Adrian got a call from his lawyer, Maria Santos. "I thought you should know. Rachel's attorney reached out. She wants to modify the custody agreement." Adrian's stomach dropped. "What? Why? Things have been fine. Not to reduce your time, to increase it." "Wait, what?" Maria's voice was careful. "Rachel is apparently taking a job that requires significant travel. She's proposing you take primary custody, with her having Mia every other weekend and holidays. It's basically a reversal of the current arrangement." What? Adrian couldn't speak for a moment. After everything Rachel had put him through, the complaints, the hearing, the supervised visitation, she was now asking him to take more responsibility? "What's the catch?" he asked finally. "No catch that I can see. She's not asking for reduced child support. She's not making demands about Sienna. She needs the flexibility for her career, and she's acknowledging that you're the more stable parent right now." Did she actually say that? That I'm the stable one? Her exact words were that you've demonstrated consistent parenting and that Mia would benefit from more time with you. After they hung up, Adrian sat in his car outside work trying to process this development. Rachel was admitting he'd been right? That his life wasn't the disaster she'd claimed? That Sienna wasn't a danger to their daughter? He called Sienna. "Rachel wants me to take primary custody." Sienna was quiet for a moment. "How do you feel about that?" Confused, vindicated, terrified. Adrian laughed. "All of the above? It's what you wanted, though. More time with Mia." "Yeah, but I thought I'd have to fight for it. I didn't think Rachel would just hand it over." Maybe she finally realized you're a good father. Or maybe her career is more important than she wants to admit. Either way, you won. It doesn't feel like winning. That's because you're not petty enough to enjoy her admission that she was wrong. Sienna's voice was warm. "But trust me, this is winning. Take it." Adrian accepted the modification. By June, Mia was living with him and Sienna full-time, visiting Rachel every other weekend. The transition was smoother than Adrian expected. Mia adjusted quickly, decorating her room with more posters and bringing home art projects that Sienna hung on the fridge like proud parent trophies. Rachel was civil during exchanges now. Not warm, but not hostile. One Saturday when she picked Mia up, she looked at the house, at the garden Sienna had planted, at the swing set Adrian had installed in the backyard, and said, "You've done well here." It wasn't an apology, but it was acknowledgement. "Thanks," Adrian said. Rachel hesitated, then added, Sienna's good with her. I can see that. Adrian's throat tightened. She is. Huh. I'm sorry I tried to keep you apart. I thought I was protecting Mia from instability, but I was just punishing you for moving on. It was the closest Rachel had ever come to admitting she'd been wrong. Adrian didn't push it. Water under the bridge, he said. Rachel smiled slightly. You always were too forgiving. It's annoying. She drove away with Mia, and Adrian stood in the driveway feeling like maybe, finally, they'd all moved past the worst of it. Summer brought lazy weekends and vacation planning. Sienna suggested they take Mia somewhere she'd never been, somewhere that would create memories untainted by divorce and custody battles and adult complications. They chose the beach, a week in a rental house on the coast, far enough from the city that work emails felt irrelevant, and the biggest decision was whether to build sandcastles or hunt for shells. Mia loved it. She spent hours in the water, jumping waves and shrieking with laughter. Sienna taught her to body surf, both of them coming back to shore with salt-crusted hair and matching grins. Adrian took pictures, documenting these moments because he knew someday Mia would want to remember the summer her family became whole again. One evening after Mia went to bed, Adrian and Sienna sat on the deck watching the ocean turn silver under moonlight. I've been thinking, Adrian said. Always dangerous. He reached over and took her hand. We've been together over a year now. We survived a scandal, a custody battle, public humiliation, and home renovation. We've built a life. We've proven we work. Are you proposing or listing accomplishments? Adrian laughed nervously. Both? Sienna turned to face him fully. Adrian Cole, are you seriously asking me to marry you while sitting on a beach house deck in your swim trunks? I don't have a ring. I didn't plan this. I was watching you with Mia today, and I thought about how a year ago I was terrified of losing everything. And now I can't imagine my life without you. And I realized I don't want to spend another day not being married to you. Sienna's eyes filled with tears. That's the worst proposal I've ever heard. Is that a no, Income? That's a yes, you idiot. She kissed him, tasting like ocean salt and sunscreen. Yes, I'll marry you. Even though you're proposing without a ring on a rental property deck like some kind of amateur. I'll get you a ring. The biggest ring you've ever seen. I don't want a big ring. I want a real one. Something that means something. Deal. They sat there holding each other, and Adrian thought about the parking garage where this had all started. How one reckless confession had demolished their lives and rebuilt them into something better. How falling apart had been the only way to become whole. When they told Mia the next morning, she squealed so loud the neighbors probably heard. Does this mean Sienna's going to be my mom? I'm not replacing your mom, Sienna said carefully, but I'm going to be your family. Officially, sit. Like a bonus mom? Exactly like a bonus mom. Mia threw herself at Sienna in a hug that nearly knocked them both over. This is the best vacation ever. They got married in September, exactly 1 year after the board meeting where Sienna had resigned. It wasn't a big wedding, just close friends, family, and Mia as the flower girl wearing a purple dress she'd picked out herself. They held the ceremony in their backyard under the oak tree Adrian and Sienna had planted together that spring. Adrian's mother cried. Rachel didn't attend but sent a card wishing them well, which felt like progress. Jeremy from IT showed up with his boyfriend and made jokes about how Adrian had landed way out of his league. Maria Santos came and brought her wife, joking that this was the happiest ending to a custody case she'd ever seen. Sienna's former assistant, Clara, was there, along with a handful of colleagues from Sterling Global who'd stayed loyal despite the scandal. They toasted to new beginnings and second chances and the courage it takes to choose happiness over safety. When Adrian and Sienna exchanged vows, they didn't use traditional words. Instead, they spoke honestly about the messy path that had brought them together. I promise to choose you, Adrian said, even when choosing you is complicated, even when it costs something, even when the easy path would be to walk away. Sienna's voice shook slightly when she spoke. I promise to build a life with you instead of hiding behind corporate walls, to be vulnerable instead of perfect, to show up even when I'm scared. They kissed under the oak tree while Mia cheered and their friends applauded, two people who'd bet everything on love and somehow won. The reception was simple. Barbecue and beer in the backyard, music from a playlist Mia had helped create, dancing on grass that was still a little patchy from the spring planting. Sienna's business partner gave a toast about how falling apart is sometimes the only way to discover who you really are. Adrian's mother admitted she'd been wrong to doubt Sienna and welcomed her to the family with a hug that looked genuinely warm. Late in the evening, after most guests had left and Mia was asleep upstairs, Adrian found Sienna standing in the kitchen looking at her wedding ring, a simple platinum band they'd chosen together. Nothing ostentatious, just real. "You okay?" he asked. "Yeah, just thinking about how different my life is now compared to a year ago. Better different or worse different?" "Better. Definitely better." She turned to face him. "A year ago, I was the CEO of Sterling Global, living in a penthouse I hated, pretending I didn't want more than quarterly earnings reports and board approval. I had everything I'd worked for and nothing I actually needed. And now I have you. I have Mia. I have a business I built on my own terms, and a house that actually feels like home." Sienna smiled. "I gave up a billion-dollar empire and gained a life. That's a pretty good trade." Adrian pulled her close. "No regrets?" "Not even one." They swayed together in the kitchen to music drifting in from outside, and Adrian thought about all the ways this could have ended differently. He could have kept his feelings buried. Sienna could have chosen her company. Rachel could have won the custody battle. Any number of things could have gone wrong, but they didn't. Because sometimes, when you risk everything for something real, the universe decides to meet you halfway. Over the next few months, their lives settled into a rhythm that felt earned rather than given. Sienna's business continued growing, landing bigger contracts and hiring her first employees. Adrian got another promotion at work, this time to a management position that came with actual respect instead of whispered gossip. Mia thrived in school, made new friends, started talking about wanting to be a marine biologist when she grew up. In November, almost exactly a year after they'd moved into the house, Sienna came home with news. "I got a call today," she said, setting down her briefcase, "from Sterling Global." Adrian looked up from helping Mia with homework. "What did they want?" "What? They want me to consult on their new AI ethics initiative. 6 months, part-time, decent money." Sienna sat down at the kitchen table. "Richard Holt called personally, said they'd made a mistake letting me go and they'd like to work with me again if I'm interested." "Are you?" Sienna was quiet for a moment. A year ago, that call would have felt like vindication, like proof I'd been right and they'd been wrong. But now it just feels like another job offer, not a referendum on my worth. "So what did you tell them?" "I said I'd think about it." She looked at Adrian. "What do you think?" "I think it's your decision. If you want to work with them again, you should. If you don't, that's fine too." "It wouldn't be going back exactly. I'd be an outside consultant. I'd still have my business, my autonomy." "Then it sounds like you already know what you want to do." Sienna smiled. "You're annoyingly good at that." "At what?" "At letting me make my own choices without trying to influence them." "I learned from the best." In the end, Sienna accepted the consulting contract, not because she needed redemption from Sterling Global, but because the project was interesting and she could do it on her own terms. She'd show up for meetings, provide expertise, collect her paycheck, and go home to the life she'd built. It felt like closure. Not the dramatic kind, no big confrontation with the board, no vindication speech about how they'd been wrong, just a quiet acknowledgement that she'd moved past them. They were part of her history, not her future. December brought their first anniversary of living together and their first Christmas as a married couple. They'd established new traditions, decorating the tree together, making cookies from scratch, watching terrible holiday movies while Mia provided running commentary on how unrealistic the plots were. On Christmas Eve, after Mia went to bed, Adrian and Sienna sat in the living room drinking hot chocolate and looking at the tree lights. "Remember last year?" Sienna asked. "When we just moved in and everything was boxes and chaos? And you gave me that spare key like it was some grand romantic gesture." "It was a grand romantic gesture," Adrian laughed. "It was sweet, sappy, but sweet. This year, I got you something better." She handed him a small wrapped box. Inside was a photo frame containing a picture from their wedding, the moment right after they'd kissed, both of them laughing. Mia in the background jumping with her arms raised in celebration. Under the photo was an engraved plate, the Colvale family, built from ruins. Adrian's throat closed up. Sienna, I know we're not perfect. I know we still have Rachel drama and work stress and all the normal life problems. But we're real. And we chose each other even when choosing each other was the hardest thing either of us had ever done. She took his hand. That's worth remembering. Adrian set down the frame and pulled her into his arms, holding her like he had in that parking garage 17 months ago when everything had started falling apart. I love you, he said. I love you too, even when you cry at sappy Christmas gifts. It's a good gift. It really is. They sat there in the soft glow of Christmas lights, two people who'd survived scandal and custody battles and public humiliation to build something that felt like home. The new year brought fresh challenges. Sienna's work travel picked up. Adrian dealt with a difficult project at the office. Mia struggled with a mean girl situation at school that required parent-teacher conferences and uncomfortable conversations about standing up for yourself. But they handled it together. Sienna helped Mia practice assertive responses while Adrian dealt with the school administration. When Sienna had to travel for a week, Adrian managed solo parenting without falling apart. When Adrian got overwhelmed with work deadlines, Sienna picked up the slack at home. It wasn't perfect. They fought sometimes. About money, about parenting decisions, about whose turn it was to deal with the broken garbage disposal. But they fought fair, and they always came back to each other. In February, on a random Tuesday evening, Adrian found Sienna in the basement office working late on a proposal. Come to bed, he said. In a minute. I just need to finish this section. Adrian walked over and closed her laptop. It's midnight. The proposal can wait. Sienna looked up at him, ready to argue, then stopped. You're right. It can wait. They went upstairs together, checked on Mia, who was sleeping with her new stuffed dolphin, and climbed into bed in the house they'd made together. You ever think about where we'd be if you hadn't said anything that night? Sienna asked quietly. If you just kept your feelings to yourself and we'd gone on pretending we were just colleagues? Sometimes. But then I remember what my life looked like before you, going through the motions, pretending to be fine, never risking anything. And I'm grateful I was reckless enough to tell the truth. Even though it destroyed everything? Especially because it destroyed everything. Some things need to burn down before you can build something better. Adrian turned to face her. You taught me that. You walked away from an empire because you realized it was killing you. That's the bravest thing I've ever seen. I was terrified. I know, but you did it anyway. And look what we built from the ashes. Sienna kissed him. Not bad for a parking garage confession. Not bad at all. They fell asleep tangled together, and Adrian dreamed about oak trees and birthday parties and all the ordinary, extraordinary moments that made up a life worth living. Spring came around again, marking 2 years since that stormy night in the parking garage. Adrian and Sienna didn't make a big deal of it. No dramatic anniversary celebration, no recreating the moment. They just lived their lives, which felt like celebration enough. One Saturday afternoon, Adrian was in the backyard pushing Mia on the swing while Sienna planted tomatoes in the garden. The sun was warm, the grass was green, and for a moment everything felt impossibly perfect. But Adrian had learned that perfect was overrated. What mattered was real. And this messy, complicated, beautiful life they'd built together was as real as it got. Mia jumped off the swing mid-arc and landed in the grass, laughing. Did you see that, Daddy? I flew, Kate. I saw. You're getting brave. Sienna says brave is when you're scared, but you do it anyway. Adrian looked over at Sienna, who'd paused her planting to watch them. She smiled, dirt on her hands, happiness in her eyes. Sienna's right, Adrian said. Brave is doing the hard thing even when you're scared. Like when you asked Sienna to marry you? Exactly like that. And like when Sienna quit her job? That too. Mia thought about this, then ran over to Sienna and threw her arms around her waist, getting dirt all over both of them. Sienna didn't even flinch, just hugged her back. Adrian watched his daughter and his wife together in the garden of the house they'd made home and thought about all the ways his life had fallen apart so it could come together right. People always talked about love like it was supposed to be easy, like finding the right person meant everything would magically work out. But that wasn't how it went. Love was hard. It cost things. It required you to risk everything you'd built for something you couldn't guarantee. But when you found someone worth the risk, someone who made you braver and better and more yourself than you'd ever been alone, that was when love stopped being a fairy tale and became something real. That evening, after Mia went to bed, Adrian found Sienna on the back deck watching the sunset. "Come here often?" he asked. She smiled, just thinking. "About what?" "About how we tell Mia this story someday, when she's older and asking about how we fell in love. We tell her the truth, that her dad made a reckless confession in a parking garage, and it destroyed both our lives, and we rebuilt them into something better. You think she'll understand that? That sometimes you have to break everything to fix what's really wrong?" "I think she already understands it better than we do." Adrian sat down beside her. She watched us survive the worst of it. She knows love isn't neat or convenient. She knows it's messy and hard and worth fighting for. Sienna leaned her head on his shoulder. "We did good, didn't we? Despite all the chaos and mistakes and public humiliation, we built something good. We built something real. That's better than good." They sat there watching the sun disappear below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Two people who'd gambled everything on a feeling and won more than they'd ever imagined. Because that's the thing about love, the real kind, the messy kind, the kind that costs you everything and gives you more. It doesn't promise safety or convenience or ease. It promises truth, and sometimes truth is the only thing worth having, even when it burns your whole life down to get there. Adrian and Sienna had learned that the hard way. They'd lost jobs and reputations and the lives they'd carefully constructed. But they'd gained something infinitely more valuable: each other, and the courage to choose happiness over safety, truth over comfort, real over perfect. And in the end, that made every sacrifice worth it.